This was almost 2 years ago now. I was doing what I thought was going to be a regular vacation to where my parents live. I had rented an Airbnb for the first time, so I was really excited. The house was on a large plot of land and was very spacious and quiet. I lived in the city, so this was like luxury to me. I set everything in the room and pretty much left right away to see my family. I spent the whole afternoon with them before heading back to the Airbnb and making a quick snack, then hopping on the couch to watch a movie for the night. It was like 10 or 11, so pretty late, but in the middle of the movie, I heard someone walking outside the house. There was no mistaking that sound, and it just completely threw me off guard. I paused the movie and got up, quickly walking to the back of the house and looking out the back door. It was obviously dark out, but a guy was walking away from the house and toward the trees that were behind it. What's really creepy is that I never heard his footsteps approaching. Like he must have already been standing by the house for a while before I heard him leave. Once he was out of sight, I opened the back door and stepped outside. The back patio was empty, but along the house, there were clear shoe prints in the grass. I followed them, leading up to one of the windows, and when I looked through it, there was a direct line of sight to the couch I was sitting on. I got chills just thinking about that man staring into the house at me without me knowing. I quickly went back inside and covered up all the windows. For the next half hour, I sat in the living room and continued the movie with the volume on low. That way I could focus on listening if he came back. I didn't hear anything though. Once the movie was finished, I knew I had to get to bed, so I went back up to the window to do one last look to make sure everything was okay. I moved the curtains and saw nothing, but heard footsteps sprinting away from right outside the window. I hesitated before looking out and seeing that same guy running into the tree line. I immediately got my phone and called the police. Of course, by then, he was too far for them to find him, or even really search. However, while we were looking around the house, I noticed that my suitcase in the bedroom was open. It had clearly been searched through, and a few things were even missing. This probably happened while I was with my family, and the guy could have even been still in the house when I came back, only to sneak out of a window before I saw him. Why he came back afterward is what really disturbs me though. If I hadn't caught him watching me, there's a chance I would have gone right to bed, with him waiting right outside the window. This was last year, I think sometime in April. It was raining pretty much every day here, but this night was a lot heavier than usual, with scattered thunderstorms throughout the day. I was at work for most of the afternoon, but got back home around 8. As I was driving down my neighborhood road though, it was very clear that something had happened. All the lights were out in every single home. I pulled into my driveway and parked, and of course when I entered and tried to turn on the lights, it didn't work. The power was completely out, and my whole house was basically pitch black. I tossed my stuff by the doorway, then went down to the electrical box just to see if for some reason that worked, but it didn't. This really sucked because I didn't have hardly any spare lights aside from my phone. What I ended up doing was getting my laptop and setting it up on the coffee table in my living room. The white screen from the YouTube page that I had open lit up most of the room, so I sat back and just watched some videos. I had to work early the next day, but I didn't feel comfortable going to bed with the power out. so I was already planning on staying up late. I probably sat there for a good 2 hours, watching YouTube and checking my phone for any updates on the weather. The lightning was shaking the whole house, so it was pretty bad out there. But randomly in the night, a thump came from outside the window. I jumped a little, then turned my laptop screen to light up that side of the room. I got up and walked over, then twisted open the blinds. I froze up for a second, not expecting to see a man standing right on the other side of the window. His drenched hair was falling over his face, and he was peering through the window at me. He yelled something, but I honestly couldn't hear him with the heavy rain and thunder in the background. Being so caught off guard though, I didn't know what to do. I was a little freaked out though, so I just closed the blinds. I felt kind of horrible about it, but why was he outside banging on my window anyway? I heard him hit the window a few more times, then it went quiet. I figured he'd either given up or moved on to another house, so I turned my laptop toward me again and continued watching YouTube. The storm stayed strong through the whole night. I must have been up for another hour, but my eyes got really heavy and I just couldn't hold out any longer. I lay down on the couch and drifted off to sleep. I woke up to a loud crash. I didn't know if it was a nearby lightning strike or what, but I immediately got up from the couch. The power was still out, and the whole house was still pitch black. I turned my phone on and looked around, and that's when I heard something from the back of the house. My heart was pounding as I walked into the other room. When I shined my light down the house toward the back room, there were several large shards of glass on the ground reflecting the light back at me. I could then see the nearest window completely shattered, with rain pouring into the house and the blinds blowing frantically in the wind. And just a couple feet from there, I could see a shoulder sticking out from behind the wall. My whole body jerked when I saw them, and I instantly spun around and went for the front door. I ran through the rain, getting soaked all the way through, until I got to my neighbor's house. I stood under their overhang on the porch and called 911. It's no surprise that the man wasn't there when police showed up. Although not getting a full look at him inside my house, I was 100% sure it was the same guy from earlier, so I gave them that description. Oddly enough, or maybe not so much, there were 2 more reported break-in attempts that night, as well as several other reports of strange behavior outside people's homes. I was the only one unfortunate enough to have had them successfully break inside, but nobody knows what he was trying to do, and it seems like we won't ever know. Since then, he's never been sighted in or around our neighborhood. I was 17 and living in my parents' basement. It wasn't a trashy basement or anything. It was probably similar to what would be considered an in-law suite. My parents traveled for work all the time, so I usually wouldn't be in the basement unless I was sleeping in the bedroom down there, or playing video games, or whatever. This was during one of my parents' work trips. I was alone for a whole week. This night was a Saturday, so I didn't have school or really anything to do. I knew it was supposed to storm later in the day though, so before it was too late, I took my parents' car out to the store and got some food to make. While driving back, the storm rolled in. The roads weren't busy, thankfully, because even with the windshield wipers going at the fastest setting, it was still difficult to see. I pulled into the driveway and ran to the front door, getting inside and drying off. I then went straight to the kitchen and turned on the oven so I could make dinner. But almost right away, I heard something below me. It sounded like something falling over in the basement, like maybe a box or something. My first thought was that there might be a leak down there, and I got really worried about a possible flood, so I quickly went to the basement. I opened the door and flicked on the light, and as I walked down the steps, I didn't hear anything. No running water or any other sounds, and when I got to the bottom, everything looked okay. I walked through the main area, where I had a small couch and TV set up, and then I went to the storage room. This was the only unfinished part of the basement, where we just stored a bunch of boxes and stuff. I opened the door and looked in. At first, it all looked normal, and I was actually really confused at what I could have heard. All the boxes were stacked up still, and nothing was on the ground. But after a quick walkthrough, I noticed something really strange. One of the boxes sitting on top of the stack was open, and when I looked inside, everything was scattered all over the place. It was full of old trophies that my parents kept, and almost all of them were broken. It looked like the box had fallen and broken everything inside, and then someone quickly tossed everything back in. I felt a surge run through my body as I just stared at that box and realized what this meant. I looked up and started scanning the room. It felt like suddenly all I could think about was how loud the storm was outside, making me unable to listen for anything, which only got me more panicked. I started to back up, and just as I did, one of the boxes in the back of the room was knocked onto the ground, and behind it, a guy came running right at me. I booked it for the stairs, and I have to say, there is nothing more terrifying than hearing his footsteps climbing the stairs just a few feet behind me. The fear really got to me, and on the last step, I slammed my foot on the stairs and fell straight on the ground. Every horrible scenario just rushed through my head in that moment, but when I turned around, the guy came up to the top of the staircase and immediately ran for the front door, running out of the house. I got up and locked it behind him, then called the cops. They found an unlocked window that he climbed in through, but as far as why he came into the home, there really isn't any answer. I was getting out of work late due to a recent security issue at our company that had everyone working overtime. I would usually take the train to and from work, but since I knew I'd be out past the train's running hours, I had to drive. It was nearly an hour to get home. As I was getting out of the city though, I saw that my gas was almost empty. I didn't remember it being this low before work, but I could have been too tired to have even noticed it. I knew there was a gas station by my house though, so I was just gonna fill it up there. But 10 minutes later, an alert came up on my dashboard that I was extremely low on fuel. It had gone down way more than it should have in such a short time, and within a minute, my car was stuttering and barely running. I pulled over, and just as I put it in park, the engine cut out. I tried to start it again, but it didn't budge. I was both worried and frustrated, like how the hell was this even happening? I took out my flashlight from the glove compartment and got out. The issue took less than 5 seconds to find. There was gas clearly leaking. I had no idea how this could even have happened, since everything was fine earlier. But before I could do much thinking, a truck pulled up behind me. Their headlights were off, and they parked unnervingly quickly. like there was no hesitation. I stood up and looked at their windshield, seeing a couple figures moving around in there. "I'm okay, guys. Don't need any help," I called out, but they didn't pay any attention. They kept moving around until one of the doors opened. A guy got out, while the other, or others, stayed in the truck. Ironically, he asked if I needed help as he started walking toward me. The way he said it was weird though, with a smirk and a strange tone to his voice. Again, I said I didn't need anything. He kept walking though, until he was right in front of me, standing uncomfortably close. "Why don't I give you a ride home? It's the least I could do," he said, giving a creepy, forced smile. I declined his offer and quickly got into my car. Disturbingly, he stood there for a while, like an entire minute, just looking at me through the window and not saying anything. I just looked forward and called the police for help with my car. But the whole time, I could see him in the corner of my eye, standing right outside my window and just staring at me. During the phone call though, he walked back to his truck. I watched in the mirror as he got in, then slowly drove past me. We made eye contact as he passed by, and for a brief moment, I saw someone in his back seat. They were pressed up against the window with wide open eyes, and although I couldn't get a good look at them, I knew something was wrong. I don't think that person was inside that truck willingly. When he drove off though, the license plate was missing. Police showed up and I told them everything. There was a bit of an investigation where they found my gas tank was stabbed purposefully by someone. Likely what happened was the guy planned the whole thing out, following me until my car broke down and hoping to get me to accept the ride. Whether that person was truly in danger, we don't know, because the man was never found. I was working my regular 2 to 10 closing shift at a small drive-through cafe. It's a really small place, with just 5 or so indoor seating tables, since most of our business is focused on the drive-through. This wasn't a busy spot though, especially during the later hours of the day. Being the only one working the closing shift, I'd usually sit at one of the dining tables and be on my phone, only getting up if someone came to the drive-through. It was drizzling outside this night, so it was even less busy than it already would have been. Past 7 o'clock, not a single customer came through for 2 hours straight. I was just sitting at a table watching Netflix on my phone when suddenly the front door opened. It kind of startled me, as nobody ever comes inside the shop this late. He seemed to not notice me sitting at the table though, because he walked up to a different table on the other end of the store and sat down with his back facing me. Something was definitely off about this guy though. He was very tall and wearing really dark clothing, and although it was only drizzling outside, he was soaked. Water was dripping from all over his clothes and onto the floor, and that got me thinking about how he even got here. No cars had pulled in, so he must have walked. Anyway, I stood up and walked over to the table, greeting him and asking what he wanted. He didn't smile or say hi back to me. He just sat there with a blank look on his face. I waited a few seconds before repeating myself, but he cut me off. He asked who else was working tonight. I was confused, but also slightly nervous about that question, but I still answered for some reason. "It's just me, but we close in an hour." He then asked for a small coffee, so I walked back to the kitchen and started making it. I grabbed a cup and poured it in, then turned to go back to the table when I saw him standing in the doorway to the kitchen. "Do you need something else?" He didn't respond. Now facing directly at me, I could see that his eyes were bloodshot, but his face was still blank, like no emotion whatsoever. It made me really uneasy. "Put the drink down and come with me." He was demanding it, and he looked ready to force me if I didn't. This guy was way bigger than me, so I really had no choice. I moved slow, trying to think of any way out of this as I followed him. As we left the store though, he grabbed the back collar of my shirt and pushed me across the parking lot toward the road. On the other side of this empty road was a completely wooded area with no buildings or houses as far as I knew, and that's exactly where he was leading me. Just as we were about to cross the road though, a single car came out and rolled past us. As it did, the man stopped, which forced me to stop, and both of us stared at the car and realized what it was. A police officer looking right back at us. I started screaming, and the guy immediately let go and sprinted across the road and into the woods. The officer pulled right into the parking lot and made sure I was okay, then called for backup. What's crazy is he wasn't even on his shift. He was actually heading home for the night and just happened to see us at the perfect time to save me. If he had even been 30 seconds earlier or later, I would have been dragged into those woods, unseen, and probably never made it out. Anyway, the cameras picked up some decent footage of him, but as of yet, still nothing has been found. I'll update if anything else happens, but I just hope he doesn't come back.